Hey everybody, welcome back to my YouTube channel. This is Craig Stidham, Full Circle. Hey, welcome back. I have exported the image out of Capture One and have now opened it in Photoshop so that we can take it on to the next step. But before we begin, I would like to thank fellow photographers, YouTube subscribers, and friends, Jason Abbott and Cara Hill, for recommending this video on skin retouching. Thank you. I hope this helps you out quite a bit. If you would like for me to make a video to help you out and help further your career or explain something, please drop it down below in the comments so I can see them. Please hit the like button and subscribe to see further updates on these videos. Back into Photoshop now. So here we are in Photoshop, and these are my personal actions that I think have worked over the years. I've tweaked them and made them like that. So if you're interested in these actions, I will also leave them in the description below of where you can purchase those. Okay, so I do use frequency separation. I use my own version of frequency separation, so I want to bring this in so we can see this. Okay, so if I turn on my frequency separation, it looks like that. Now, it doesn't get to this point easily. You have to do some work. So let's go ahead and expand this. Okay, so here we have a whole bunch of different layers, obviously, okay? So I have my color layers up here and my frequency separation layers up here. This white checkered layer, when you get these, if you purchase my actions, then this white checkered layer, if you hit the skin texture action, which is number 2, then it will make this layer up here at the top. I put this back in here just to demonstrate that. So after everything's finished, it kind of looks like this. All right, we know as far as frequency separation goes, gray layers is where we do our work. The colored layers is where we fine tune our color. If I turn off my top one, because my second one is just a backup, so for any reason if I mess up, I can always go back or just completely start over by duplicating this layer. If I turn this one on and off, you can see here that what I have done is basically taken away anything that does with texture. Here's kind of how I do that. I'm going to take the original, duplicated the working layer that I can kind of show you how this done. Okay, I like to get my spotting brush, work on a normal hardness, and change my flow and opacity back to 100%. I like to only retouch the amount of information that needs to without destroying other pixels around it. Now, I'm really good at retouching, but I am not by any means a professional retoucher, okay? If you need professional retouching, I recommend you find someone and send it out to, but this works pretty much for everything. What I'm gonna do is just kind of go through and knock out, you know, some of these just acne spots that obviously need to get knocked out. For sake of time, I'm not going to knock all this out. I'm just showing you kind of what I would do. Just go through. After you get done spotting every single one of these little things, you will end up with a clean layer. This has to be reclipped. So this is my cleaning layer, and as you can see, I went through and literally just spotted out everything that is imaginable. If you also look, I didn't alter the skin tone textures, I just kind of cleaned it all up. Now, there are a bunch of blackheads that she had, and my secret to that, again, is using the spot tool, but then changing my blend mode to lighten, and then using a really low deal, and then a bigger brush spot and kind of clean it up. Now, I did have these blackheads, and this piece of her nose right here, the texture's kind of gone. However, the catch is once you add the next action, level 2, then you get the skin texture, and it will take this like blurred color out of the way and add the texture back into it, and it'll disappear and nobody will be the wiser. So that's pretty cool. If we go to working on the color part of the image, then this is what we want to do. But we want to make her skin have just this really nice smooth effect to it. I'm turning this on and off so you can kind of see it. Natural, simple also. What I do right here on the working color version of that is really freaking simple, guys. I just grab my lasso tool, I use a really high feathering of say 25 and then work in really small amounts. So what I mean by that is, like, I will just literally come in here, lasso all that. It automatically feathers. Remember, I'm working on just a color, not the texture layer. And then go where it says filter, blur, Gaussian blur, and then whatever number that I use to separate in the frequency. So I believe on this image, when I actually started the action to just get me something to work with, I used the number 40 as that's just what I use, 40, and it made my frequency separation, which is where we started on this. For the Gaussian blur, I want to use about 5 over that, so I would Gaussian blur this to 45. And then that blurring is just enough to make the color layer a bit more subtle and just smooth some of these tones out. Also, when you do like this, you want to make sure that you don't lasso in these shadows, because if I lasso in the shadow and then I blur it, then the shadow will disappear. So we want to kind of keep our shadows. Also stay off any hard line. This nose bridge line, we want to stay off of that. We don't want to make that disappear. And then keep in mind there's a feather, so we want to give it some room that the feather doesn't blur into the hard lines and disappear or soften up our hard lines. What we want to do is, like right here on the cheek pan, is circle something like that. See how it snapped to the feather? Then that feathering, when we go to blur it, it won't take like nose, nostrils and make them disappear and stuff. I work in real small things, okay? This highlight on her nose, we don't want to blur and get rid of that. What I would do is stay on one side of her highlight like this, and then work the other side of the highlight like that. And then I would blur those out. Just come in here, blur that, and then blur this. And then for the cheek, there's usually a highlight right here, and we want to stay off that highlight. For this, I would draw a mask, something along those lines, and then that way I don't get rid of the natural highlight on her chin. That's what we did for this right here. When you combine that, it just makes things a bit smoother. I also did one for the background. It did go a little bit more than the 45. I would think I went to like 55 just to get rid of any texture that was back there. It went from this to that, and that's the on and off of when you get everything situated. Now if I add the skin texture, you can see that that part of her nose has the grain back in it again. And that's a simple, if you don't have my actions and you want to learn how I do that, that's real easy too. Let's just clean this up so I can start from scratch. But you can just make a new layer and then go edit, fill, and then make it 50% gray. And it will make a 50% gray layer. And then for me, I know that some people will go filter and then add noise. I kind of like the camera raw filter better, so I will go back into camera raw. And then when camera raw brings up, I don't really worry, and it's a gray layer, you can't do anything about exposure or anything, but I do love right here under effects, and then you can just add this grain however you want it to match the grain of your deal. Now, what I would recommend you do, sorry, let me cancel this. What I would recommend you do is before going to camera raw, I would turn this into a smart object. Right click and turn this layer into a smart object. Then when you go to camera raw, whatever you dial in, it will stay. And if it doesn't match your photograph as far as the grain goes, like say you have not enough grain, too much grain, it's too rough, something along those lines, because it's a smart object, you could double click and readjust that setting in the camera raw filter without having to always go back and start over and start over and start over. So I would recommend you totally do that first. After I have ran my frequency separation and it made it look like this, then I run your everyday standard Photoshop dodge and burn. There's no secret to that. Up here at the top on all of ours, I have this set of check layers, which is again sort of the same thing in Capture One. The only difference, and there's a million videos on dodge and burn, so I really am not going to get big into that, but the only difference is sometimes I think like for myself or people like me, we have a hard time with the burning, because with the dodging, we're just getting rid of anything that's dark and making it go, you know, making it blend. But with the burning, sometimes it's hard to see those, or we're too scared. Make it a bit brighter. So if I turn my burn off, now anything dark is what we want to burn in. Like for my brain, it works out amazingly. And now I can just go back into burn, basically think like I'm dodging it, but I'm getting rid of the dark stuff. But because it's inverted, whatever we burn, and then that's how it works. So I just grab my brush, and any of these little dark pits in here, these are all highlights or pixels for say that are standing out too much, and I just add the burn and it will get rid of those. Pretty cool. Okay, but concept made, okay? If you invert anything that's dark, you can tone those back down. It's just easier to see, all right? That's how I do my dodge and burn. That's the only difference from other YouTube videos that I've seen out there, is I think that one little thing for people like me make a big difference. And then I use my contouring layer, which again is in my action. I just hit contour. That's super simple. You can find it out on your own. It just makes life easier. It's just another gray layer that you draw black and white on. It's the check layers that help make your contour layer everything that it should be. Again, if I turn my image back to black and white, and then I darken the like living hell out of it, because I really am only interested right now in the highlights. I'm only interested in the highlights. When I grab my brush, in this case I'm going to, you know, draw on white obviously, and then turn my opacity down because I like to have that build up. But now I'm not just drawing a nose, you know, highlight. It's basically like paint by numbers. If I was to draw this highlight here, I'm going to do this too. I'm going to bring the opacity up so you can literally like see what I'm doing here. But I would just draw in real small amounts. Let me do this too. I'm just going to make a new layer. Maybe you can see, yeah, like this. I would just draw in real small amounts, just little highlight pieces like this. And then here's the highlight right here, and I don't want to get a big freaking brush because it's not, you know, paint by makeup. I'm going to get a smaller brush and just kind of bring this in, you know, something along this line, and then a smaller brush, and then highlight these out like that. Now this one here, this is a highlight obviously, and if I paint it white at 100%, this is where the light direction was coming from in the studio, and this is obviously the other side of the light. It's not 100%. So I would literally take my white, drop it down just a little bit, and kind of draw this in like that. The same thing here. And then I would just kind to follow like this. Now I do make these blotches like that. Again, I hit all my highlights. Again, this one, here's one that's pretty good. I'll keep that one, but this one, I would drop my opacity and do like so. Like that. And then from there, I would go blur, Gaussian blur, and then blur these down. And it kind of adds a good, it's soft, it just makes things up, but it keeps the highlights pretty much where I put them. So then if I turn this, then you can turn this on and off. You can kind of see where those are at. Obviously, then from there I would just use opacity, drop it to 0, and then move my opacity slider until I got to something that I like. Now, the contouring is again subjective. That's how I do it. I make it really, really dark, being the check layers. And then when it comes time to add the blacks, I do exactly the same thing. I just make it really light and then just paint the blacks how I want it, or the shadows, until I get my contouring. Then I just do an overall blur and then drop the opacity down to 0 and then bring it up slowly. So in this instance, 33% is all it took. If I turn this on and off, you just see just a slight subtle change in the contouring. It's not changing my image and it doesn't look so overdone. That's what I did. At this point, the only thing that is left to do is just kind of mess with it. I use selective color, which is just down here at the bottom. and I added selective color and then added a slight tone to it. I usually like to start with the blacks first. So I go to blacks, add a little bit of black to make this punchier, turn my blacks on the blue side. Psychology wise, anything blue is further away. So I think that having a colder black gives you a more depth to the image. Now, I did say that I like warm images, and I bring those in as warm images because I'm not really affecting her skin tone. I'm just now, you know, selective color changes. So little, and they're very, very minute amounts too. And then obviously, because it's a gray background, I went ahead and, you know, added a little bit of blue to that. And then on the reds, you can just take out a little magenta, either add a little yellow, and in her case I did light and dark, and then on yellows the same thing. Again, this particular step is very useful, very helpful. I think you need to get to know it a little bit more, but it's 100% subjective to you, the photographer, you, the artist. Again, just kind of flying through that particular piece. I use it a lot, but it is subjective to the image, and not everything is the same. Again, on and off with this, just so you can see it. At this particular point, I would flatten out my image, throw it away, come down here to my actions and hit sharpening, which I do love to use the 16-bit sharpening. But with medium format, I have found that you just barely need a touch to get it crisp and clean. If not, it looks so overdone. I don't like it. So we'll just kind of bring this in about like that. I think it sharpens up great. Save it, finish it, and call it a day. Just to kind of recap, that's a full circle from Capture One to Photoshop and completely done. I hope tutorial was clean and you enjoyed it. Sorry that retouching is boring as hell and made things easy. So one more time, thank you for hanging all the way out to the end of this video. Please, for the sake of making better videos and better content, hit the like button, subscribe, leave comments below. I will try my best to answer everything personally. Please don't be a troll. We don't need that kind of stuff. So have a great day. Again, my name is Craig Stidham, and I will catch you in the next video. Bye.